Hi, I'm Andrea, and in this video, I will review an effective informal assessment strategy for the classroom. Specifically, I'm reviewing the pro-con grid. Using the right assessment strategy with the right fit for your course and your teaching goals is important. This is especially true because assessment for learning works best when it is given regularly over the breadth of the learning experience. Therefore, it's important to know about the principles behind the strategy you use and ensure it's used effectively. Let's review what the purpose of classroom assessment techniques are. Importantly, it's to obtain feedback on the lesson plan effectiveness and of student satisfaction with teaching and classroom activities. It's to monitor students' learning, to improve students' retention and learning skills, to improve communication and collaboration with students, and ultimately, to improve teaching techniques. What is a pro-con grid and what's its purpose? Well, a pro-con grid is simply a list of the pros and cons of a scenario or course topics. One of the pros of making a pro-con list is it's familiar, and most students have probably made a list like this. It's used for students to consider the cost-benefit analysis or to consider the for and against arguments for a topic or scenario. One of the main drivers of this strategy is to enable students to think critically and do a deeper analysis on the topic. This technique is effective as it requires students to synergize their understanding of what has been taught. The heart of this assessment technique is to see if students are able to think beyond the surface level of the question and be able to analyze both sides of the issue. To determine if this classroom assessment technique is right for your course, consider your teaching goals along with your course content. But if you're new to classroom assessment techniques, don't worry too much. It's best to keep the goals in mind, but don't overcomplicate it. Assessments should be easy to set up and try in your classroom. This strategy will work well in business and marketing classes, public policy courses, political science, biology, medicine, criminology. The assessment technique works well when given to students individually to complete or as a class discussion. The pro-con grid also provides learners the opportunity to see the issue from the opposing side. Their thinking is stretched to see the perspective from the side they may not consider without being prompted to. What are the pros and cons of the pro-con grid? Well, the pro-con grid is a technique that is very familiar and easy for students to understand. It's relatively easy and takes little time for the instructor to prepare and to administer to students. It's also an easy technique to understand, and it doesn't take too much time for students to complete. The technique has the flexibility to allow the students to pick a side and then do the pro-con grid. Also, the instructor can assign the students a point of view and have them think about the pro-con grid from that perspective. It's flexible, develops critical thinking skills, and as an assessment follow-up, it can encourage further in-class discussion. The cons. Now, a pro-con list can be too simplistic a technique for students to answer more complex issues. Topics covering social justice issues or case studies that have ethical implications can be challenging to simplify with a pro-con list that has only the for or against or cost-benefit approach to analyzing the topic. Students may not think critically enough about the scenario and provide only a surface-level list. This will show the students have either not bothered to think thoroughly about the topic or they're not capable of it. If the topic or scenario being discussed is potentially controversial, the students may prefer to provide the feedback anonymously, or since the assessment is not for marks, they may choose not to engage and not fully complete it. Best practices. Now start by providing a framework for students who analyze the pro-con list. Now, how many pros and cons should the students come up with? Whose perspective are they considering when deciding what is a pro and a con? To set the strategy up for success, consider if it should be a class discussion or the individual assignment, allowing students to spend time contemplating both sides of the scenario. Having students provide information individually potentially allows students to contribute more, especially if they're hesitant to provide input in class on perspectives on those potentially sensitive topics. Either way, ensuring the classroom always has a respectful and collaborative environment will allow students to feel at ease. Feedback to the learners. The pro-con list is a great assessment for learning technique that facilitates further discussion. After the instructor reviews the list and checks the responses against theirs, the in-class discussion can center around some of the pros and cons not covered by students or covered only by a few. Perhaps there's a dominant point of view within the class, which is something worth exploring through small groups or discussion within the wider class. It's important to allow students to see as many pros and cons as possible, which will open up their critical thinking skills and provides them a perspective they may not have thought about but should be aware of. So for instructors looking for familiar and effective assessment techniques for their post-secondary students, then it's also easy to implement. Give the pro-con grid a try. Thank you.